It says, be cool, be nice. Be cool, be nice. Hi, it's Nathan, back with another writing video. This video is being beamed directly to your YouTube machine. This video is about what I learned writing the first draft of my novel in a month. In March of this year, just as the schools here in Japan were being closed due to the coronavirus, my writing group and I decided that we would do our own version of NaNoWriMo, or Novel in November, in March. In this video, I will talk about what I learned through that process. A lot of it was about discovering what kind of writer I am and learning not to make things more difficult for myself. In this video, I refer a lot to NaNoWriMo, or National Novel Writing Month. Now, I assume that most of you already know what that is, but if you don't, I'll leave a link to information in the description. Basically, it's a challenge to write a 50,000 word novel draft in a month. Perhaps one of the more obvious and immediate things I learned was that 1600 to 1700 words isn't a difficult amount of words to write in a day, and over the first few days I managed that goal quite easily. However, I found that this was quite a difficult amount of words to write every day on the same story, which must keep building and remain consistent with itself. In order to do this, you have to try to make things as easy for yourself as possible. The ideas in this video are about how I tried to do that. Plotting or pantsing. I had always considered myself a pantser, or a discovery writer. I thought that's where the magic was in writing. Something happening in the story that you didn't intend to happen before you sat down to write. Most of the short stories, short films and plays that I'd ever written weren't planned or outlined. I'd simply put characters in a situation and discovered what they would do and what the outcome would be. I'd always found that even if I did have some idea about what the outcome of a story would be, it would almost certainly change through the writing process. What I found out during the writing process was that I ran into the same problems that I had in my past failed attempts at NaNoWriMo. I would get to the end of the section I knew about, the section that contained my initial idea, often the setup to the story, and I wouldn't know what came next. I was stuck. So my writing had to come to a halt while I thought about what I was going to write next. After going through this process 2 or 3 times within my first 5,000 words, I realized that I was never going to get to 50,000 words in this way. So I compromised with myself and I outlined to the end of Act 1. Of course, that was the beginning of a slippery slope. Just knowing I was outlining until the end of Act 1 presupposed that I was writing in a 3-act structure, Act 1 being the setup. How could I set up a story where I didn't have at least a vague idea where it was going? You can see the kind of philosophical issues I was dealing with. Of course, when talking about whether you like to outline heavily or to fly by the seat of your pants, you've got to remember that this is a spectrum, with people who like to outline heavily at one end and people who don't like to plan at all at the other, and most writers falling somewhere in between them. I certainly don't want to get into whether it's better to outline or to not outline. All I feel I can say about it is, I needed to know where I was going so as not to write myself into a corner. So, the big takeaway for me was that I needed to give outlining a chance, especially because I was writing the longest piece of prose that I'd ever attempted. We'll see if that remains the same when I sit down to write a draft that doesn't have the same sort of time pressure on it. My t-shirt has David Bowie on it. When I lived in New Zealand, I competed in a lot of 48-hour film competitions. The idea behind these competitions was that you wrote, shot, and edited the film within 48 hours. In order to stop people from starting before the contest period began, you weren't given your genre, character, dialogue, or prop elements before the 48 hours began. For some reason, I'd always approached NaNoWriMo this way. Why? Did I not think it was hard enough to begin with? I don't know. It's just the way I assumed it should be. By way of a conclusion, I want to talk about what I'm doing this November for NaNoWriMo. Number 1. I'm going to prepare. Our writing group has already planned to get together near the beginning of October to talk about initial ideas and what we could do with them. The idea is that we give ourselves time to workshop a few stories, or at least bounce our ideas off other people before we commit to a project. Before November starts, it would be good to have, if not a full written outline, at least an idea about the beginning, middle, and end of my story. Ideas about who my protagonist is, what they're lacking, and how they come to discover what that is. What their character arc is, and of course, what they're up against. To give a bit more detail, this is what I'd ideally like to know before I start writing my next novel. Okay, about my hero or main character. So, I'd want to know who they are, what does he/she want, what is stopping him or her from getting what they want, what is it that they actually need, what is it that will complete them as a character. Many writing books talk about the difference between what a character wants and what they need. What a character wants is usually something that they think will make their life better. More money, a girlfriend, more respect, to be the best player on the team. Through most stories, the hero figures out that what they actually want isn't what they need, and what they need becomes clear to them. What a character needs is often referred to as the flaw of the character, or a belief that they have about the world that is mistaken. Save the Cat Writes a Novel refers to it as that metaphorical shard of glass that is buried deep inside the character. Usually, the hero's flaw, or their metaphorical shard of glass, is presented or at least hinted at in the first act. Structure. I'd like to have at least some idea about the following plot points: the inciting incident, the first act turning point, the second act turning point, and the final conflict and resolution. How it's going to turn out. When am I going to write these words? I'll be a lot busier in November than I was in March. One thing that I'd like to do is sit down and map out when are my better opportunities to write. I'll be working full-time, and my wife and I also have a 1-year-old daughter. So, that's what writing in a month taught me about what I wanted to do before I sat down to write the next novel. I'm certainly not saying that this is something everybody should do. I'm just saying that from what I learned from doing it the first time, making these preparations will give me the best chance for success. Thank you for watching the video.